Silence washed through the forest. It lingered onto every single black leaf that would fall down to the shadow-covered forest floor. It crept through the woods and hugged every limb and wrapped itself around every hump of root. Silence filled the forest. In fact, there was never any noise in the forest until nightfall. As the sun would begin to drop below the horizon, a single tree in the dead center of the woods would come alive. This tree was as wide as a well, and as sun fell down, the tree would stand up straight. It would begin to shake, and it would begin to shudder, and the limbs would move and would creak, and from deep within the belly of this tree came a single sound. It said, Ribbah. Now that sound echoed around and through the entire forest, all the way to the edge of the woods until it crashed into the wall of a village on the outskirts of the forest. Every single night, that sound, Ribbah, would hit the village just as the little children were getting ready for bed. Candles and kerosene lanterns stayed lit all night long in this village in every single bedroom. Now, this particular night, the villagers had gathered in the town square to discuss and discern what they were going to do about this problem. They never had any idea what was actually causing the sound. In fact, anytime somebody went into the forest to find out, the horse would return, but not the rider. The rider would never be seen or heard from again. The villagers gathered again. They began to talk about this. They said, "Who will go? Who will go?" "Not I, not I. No, my cousin went last year and I've never seen my cousin since." "No, I will not go. I won't do it. I have too much work to do here. You can't afford to lose me." They argued and they bickered and they complained, but every one of them was afraid. There was one little girl, a little girl named Cora, who heard the arguing, and she heard the Ribbah every single night, and she was tired of being afraid. She was just fed up with it. So while the parents and the adults were arguing in the town square, she went back to her home, where she packed up a bag. She put a net inside the bag and a lantern in the bag and some sandwiches and some food to take with her. She put the backpack over her and then pulled a cloak up over her head. She looked around, saw an opportunity, and made for the forest. Just before she was about to step out of the village and into the forest, she heard a voice. "Cora! What do you think you're doing?" She stopped, looked around, and saw her little brother, Hubert. She said, "Hubert, I'm not doing anything. Don't worry about it. Just go back home, go back home." "I know what you're doing. You're about to go into the forest, and you're going to find out what's making that sound. Well, not without me, because I'm braver than you are." She said, "You are not, but very well. Go back and get something, and you can come with me." Hubert went back to his home, and he gathered up his own backpack, and he put a rope inside of it, his own lanterns, his own sandwich, and he took all of that, put it on, put his own cloak up over his head, and then the two of them began to make towards the forest edge. And just as they were about to step into the forest, they heard another voice. "What do you two think that you're doing?" It was their little sister, Emily. She said, "I know what you're doing. You're going off into the forest, and I'm not going to let you." "Yes, you are," said Hubert. "No, I'm not. I'm going to go tell Mom and Dad right now." No. Cora and Hubert thought about it for a second, and then they grabbed Emily. They said, "You don't have time to go back and get anything, but you are coming with us." They made Emily walk in the middle of them. Hubert and Cora took out their lanterns, and the lantern light shone just enough around them to show that the trees were completely black. The leaves were completely black. It wasn't just the shadow of nightfall. Everything was black inside this forest. As they went walking, you would expect to hear the crumpling of the leaves, but there was nothing at all. There was no sound of animals or the ooh, ooh of an occasional owl. No sound of a babbling brook going through the woods somewhere in the distance. They walked. The only sound they would hear at times was the loud Ribbah. They traveled through, and eventually they made it to the center of this forest, where that very large tree was. They could see that it was moving and it was groaning. They thought, well, maybe it's just the wind. Maybe the wind is just blowing up there. I don't know. They made Emily sit down on a broken log nearby, while Cora and Hubert started to run around the tree, banging on it, saying, "What is going on over here?" Shouting out to it. That made the tree angry. The tree began to shake even more, and its branches creaked and groaned and began to reach down for the children. It would reach for them and stretch, and they would tuck and tumble and dive and weave around it. They yelled out, "What is going on? This tree is alive! It's alive! It's going to get us!" They were afraid. This tree was getting angrier because it wasn't able to capture them. It looked down and it saw sweet little Emily sitting on that broken log. It thought, here's a child who's not running from me. I will crush it. And so just above Emily's head, it broke off another large branch and it went sailing down. And Emily looked up just in time to see the branch, and she jumped out of the way, and it crashed right in front of her to the ground. She looked at it, and just off of the branch, there was a limb, a very slender, straight limb. It had little holes in it. Well, she thought, well, that's an interesting looking limb. I'm going to keep it. So she reached down and she broke off that limb. And as she held it in her hands, she noticed that the little holes looked a lot like an instrument that she had at home. So she took it to her mouth and began to blow into it. And as the first sound left that blackened flute that she had ripped off of that branch, the tree stood still. The children stopped running. They began to look around. Emily continued to play. And as she did so, the tree began to shake again, but the branches stayed in place, began to shake, and then a line started to etch its way up through the middle of that tree, and it opened to reveal a doorway. Hubert and Cora began to fight. I'm going in first. No, I'm going in first. No, I am. I'm the bravest. No, I'm the bravest, they would say. Eventually, Hubert made it over to the door. He opened the door, and as soon as he did, this gust of disgusting putrid air hit him, blew him back on his behind. Oh, just disgusting. Cora reached up and felt slime around the inside of the doorway. Oh, it was disgusting. They both took their lanterns to see what was inside. They held it in the doorway, and the light would disappear. It was as though something had eaten the light. They took their lantern out and shone it around the tree. They could see the reflection of the light on the tree, but inside, pitch black completely. They said, I'm still going in. I'm still the bravest. Oh, they grabbed Emily and they pulled Emily inside. And as soon as all three children were inside, the door slammed shut. They looked around, and even though there was no light source, it was oddly lit in there. It was an eerie black and white, this gray everything. And the inside of the tree wasn't made of wood. Instead, it was stone. They looked off to their left, and they saw that there was a winding staircase going down, 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 deep into the earth. Cora said, I'm the oldest. I'm going first. Hubert said, very well. Emily, you're in the middle. Okay. She took that flute and put it inside a pocket and followed Cora down. They went down, 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 deep into the earth. And once they were there, they found a very, very small door, just large enough for them to crawl through. They opened it up and went inside. It was cold. Oh, they were thankful for their cloaks. It was so cold inside. They could feel the air blowing from somewhere, but they had no idea where. They held up their lanterns. They shined the light, and they could see streaks of red and occasionally a circle of yellow with black lines going through it. They held the lanterns together, and what was standing before them was a massive, gigantic, enormous toad. This toad looked at them. Ribbah, it said. Cora took out her net. She took out her net and she jumped up onto the frog's back, but the frog was having none of that. No, sir, not at all. He leapt up with his powerful legs and slammed her back into the top of this cavern ceiling. She went falling back down to the earth, rolled off of his back to the ground, knocked unconscious. Hubert said, not my sister, you're not doing that to my sister. And he jumped up with his rope to get her and to get the frog. And before Hubert could get there, the frog's tongue came out and fast as lightning, it wrapped around Hubert, spun him around, knocked him out cold. Last was poor little Emily. She didn't have anything with her. She didn't know what she was going to do. The frog looked at her. Ribbah. And she remembered that flute, the one she had broken off of that branch. She took it out of her pocket. She thought, maybe it's something. She began to play. That frog recognized the flute. Before the first sound could come out, he shot his tongue out, but then the sound of the flute hit it. And just like it made the tree stand still, it made the frog stand still. The tongue shot out and it landed with a thud right before Emily's feet. She continued to play. With one hand while she reached down with her other hand and picked up the frog's tongue. And it was all gross and mashed inside of her fingers. Slobber was going everywhere, but she took that tongue and she pulled and pulled and pulled all while playing. She pulled his entire tongue out of his mouth, and then she took that tongue and she walked it around and wrapped it around and around and around and around and around his legs before finally tying it in a nice little bow behind his back. She finally stopped playing the flute. The frog looked at her, tried to pull his tongue back in, and couldn't at all. Tried to jump, but couldn't because his tongue was wrapped and tied around his legs. She went over and she woke up Cora. Cora took the net and put the net over the frog's back. Then she woke up Hubert. Hubert took the rope and tied the net with the rope onto the frog's back and around the frog. And then together they all three started to pull that frog, and that frog went through that tiny door with a pop. Took that frog up the spiraling staircase, up and up and up and up and up and out of that tree. And the moment that frog was out of the tree began to shrink. Ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk. Shrink down to size, and it changed its color, and the leaves turned to green, and golden apples began to sprout from the boughs of the tree and began to fall down around the children. They collected as many apples as they could and put them all inside their backpacks, and then they pulled that frog all the way through the forest. And at every moment, everything that was left behind with the frog, that forest would come to life. They could hear animals in the forest. They could hear the babbling brooks. The wind and the nice, gentle breeze had returned to the forest. By the time they had pulled that frog to the village all the way through the forest was alive again. And that night, there in the village, everybody celebrated Cora and Hubert and Emily, and they all feasted on golden apples and frog legs. Don't forget to sub if you like my story hub. Ring that little bell so you'll hear the tales I tell. And give me a thumbs up on YouTube. Keep on popping, folks.